FLM, wide open thinking, world-class work, and far-reaching results. Now with locations in Minneapolis, Columbus, Indianapolis, and Washington, D.C. A strategic marketing and communications company dedicated to serving clients who specialize in the business of agriculture and the life of rural communities.
Thank you for joining us for our latest Agri-Pulse Meet the Farmhands video, joined today by Martha Scott Poindexter from Bunge, North America. Martha Scott, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, for starters, can you just kind of give us an idea of the timeline of your career, as far back as you'd like to go, just kind of the places you've been, the places you've worked throughout your time in Washington?
I came to Washington about 26 years ago. I started with Senator Thad Cochran on his personal staff, and worked there for a couple of years, worked downtown, and then really started working on the Hill with Saxby Chambliss when he was representative in 1990. I guess he was elected in 92. So worked for him as his LD, went back and worked for Thad Cochran on appropriations for 5 years, worked for Monsanto 1 year, and then when Saxby Chambliss won the Senate, I went back to work for him as his LD, and then as his staff director at the Senate Agriculture Committee on the majority and minority side, and then on the Senate Intelligence Committee as staff director for the minority.
Okay, and since you've joined Bunge North America, made that transition from Capitol Hill to government affairs, lobbyist, whatever the particular vernacular you'd like to choose, what was that transition like for you?
It was hard. It was hard to leave a boss that I loved, and I really believed in the work he was doing. Also, I saw my work on Capitol Hill as public service, and so transitioning to the private sector was, you had to change your mindset.
Mm-hmm. During your time on the Hill, you, as you mentioned, you work for a couple of Southern lawmakers, and a typical talking point around agriculture policy is that it's not as much partisan as it is regional. And a lot of the folks that we talk to are from that northern agriculture background, and southern agriculture seems to wield a particular balance of power sometimes. Do you see that, or did you see that when you were working on the Hill, the more regional than partisan? How did that kind of rear its head? It's
funny, I really did see a stark difference, especially in the makeup of the committee. When I first started with Senator Cochran on the 1990 Farm Bill, we had Howell Heflin, Jesse Helms, I'm trying to think, David Pryor from Arkansas, Thad Cochran. There was a large Southern contingency during that 90 Farm Bill on the committee. And as over the years, especially when Saxby was there, it was a much smaller Southern contingency, and more Midwestern members were on the committee, and Midwestern policy, was more prominent and more represented on the committee.
Right. I mean, how do you think that works out from a policy perspective? How do you think that shapes the legislation?
Oh, I think it makes a huge difference. I mean, your power is the vote. So depending on how many members you have from one geographic region or the other, then it's either more compromise, or you can pretty much run the train if you want. So.
And through your time working for Senator Chambliss, you've got a pretty interesting Venn diagram on the committees, I think, because you've spent time in both Senate Agriculture and Senate Intelligence.
Right, two completely different committees.
I mean, are you aware of anyone else that has made that transition outside of the folks that worked with you for Senator Chambliss?
I don't know of anyone that really has done that, no.
So what was it like working for two staunchly different committees?
Well, one was,
Capitol Hill?
Senate Agriculture, we held oversight hearings and we wrote legislation. But in the Senate Intelligence Committee, most everything is classified. So you didn't deal with outside forces, in that you did not deal with a lot of lobbyists. You dealt mostly with departmental folks and government people. And you were in a setting where you could not talk about anything or with anyone else outside. And all our hearings were closed, meaning there was no press and there was no one unless they were authorized to be in those hearings. So it was a very different type of culture in itself.
And it's often, there's often a link made between agricultural food security and national security. Did you ever see those two bridges kind of intersect during your time on either agriculture or intelligence? I mean, did you see those two paths cross at all?
We did, actually. the Intelligence Committee would do some studies, and we would be like, y'all don't need to be doing these. But I don't think the intelligence community sees food and food security as a national security issue as strongly as the Agriculture Committee does, or the agriculture community, which is a shame, but that's also because we are food secure, and we've never been in a situation where we've been insecure, at least in most of our generations. So it's they are aware of it, but it is not one of the leading things they deal with.
Did that ever come up in interacting with maybe intelligence officials from other countries? The awareness of the American food security system?
Well, just in the awareness of food security and how it can keep a country, safe, and the political climate can change on a dime. If you have people that are hungry in the streets, like look at Venezuela right now, then you have unrest and upheaval in government.
And in that committee Venn diagram we were talking about earlier, not a lot of people have worked on both committees, but surely, I got to imagine, I don't know this for sure, but I got to imagine you're the only person that's ever been the staff director for both committees.
I think so.
Yeah. And to be blunt, a woman nonetheless has done
correct.
this.
Yeah.
Throughout your time on Capitol Hill, when you first walked onto Capitol Hill, did you ever think there would be a point in time where there would be a female staff director of two fairly powerful Senate committees?
No, I never. My goal when I worked for Senator Cochran in his personal office was always to be on a committee, but I never thought I would be able to lead a Senate committee, and especially two different committees of that. I remember the day Senator Chambliss, I went in to talk to him because I had some interviews with some outside companies, and told him that I was interviewing with them, and because he had made the change to move to vice chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee and was leaving as ranking member of the Senate Agriculture Committee. And he said, "You don't need to interview, you're going to go with me." And I said, "What? I don't know anything about intelligence." And he said, "But you know me and you know the Senate, and so you can learn the issues." And he was right. I could learn the issues. I may not bring an in-depth background to it, but I knew exactly what he needed and what kind of information he needed, and I could lead the staff to provide that for him.
That's how you got to intelligence. How did you get into agriculture? Was there an agricultural background in your upbringing, or was it a particular policy interest? How did you end up there?
I grew up on a cotton, rice, and soybean farm in Mississippi, in the Mississippi Delta, and I met Thad Cochran on the streets of Jackson, Mississippi, with a man named Judge William Barber, who's a cousin of Haley Barber's, and Judge Barber knew me, and we stopped and visited, and I was looking for a job in Washington at the time, and Senator Cochran asked me for my resume to send it to his chief of staff at the time, Bill LaForge, and they were working on the 1990 Farm Bill at the time. And so I sent my resume in, and I was a nutrition major, actually a home ec major at the time for Mississippi State, but with an emphasis in nutrition. And they needed someone to help with the 1990 Farm Bill nutrition title. And so I worked for legislative assistant Mark Keenum at the time. So that's how I began my career in agriculture.
And you said you were a home ec or a nutrition major, but was the policy focus always there for you, or could your career have taken a left turn at some other point and maybe you'd become a dietitian or a home ec teacher or something along that nature?
I actually did become a registered dietitian, but I never practiced nutrition. I went the policy route and stayed in politics. So.
Throughout your time on Capitol Hill, how did you observe the discourse change? I mean, how did you observe what it takes to make a bill become law, and just the daily workings of Capitol Hill? How did you see that change during your time in Washington?
It was interesting because I believe most likely the Senate Agriculture Committee is probably one of the last committees that actually holds conference hearings. I never had a formal conference hearing on the Intelligence Committee. We did everything pre-conference or at the staff level. Or it was the Big Four, as we called them back then. It was the Senate and the House chairman and vice chairman on the Intelligence Committee that would get in a room and decide the final things. And we would have we would pass it on the House side, pass it on the Senate side, and bounce it over to the House side. They'd pass it. We never had a conference committee.
Do you think what do you think is the better process? Do you think better legislation comes as a result of the conference committee or as a result of the big four, as you say?
Oh, no. I believe in the process, and I think that that is the one thing that is missing now from the Senate and the House and Congress itself and the way that it works. It was set up for a reason, and we should follow the way that our forefathers thought it should be and how it has evolved over the years. And it's a shame because there are a lot of staffers on the Hill that have never attended a conference or know how to prepare for a conference, a House conference or a Senate conference or a joint conference.
When you think of your time on Capitol Hill, what's the one defining moment or defining memory throughout the course of those 25 years on Capitol Hill? What's the one day that, or one topic or session or one time that really speaks out for you?
There were so many. I learned a lot from the members that I worked for. I worked for fine gentlemen, and I also learned from, Dianne Feinstein, Chairman Feinstein. I learned a lot from her too, working on the Intelligence Committee. I think the most memorable, it's hard to define the number one memorable event, but the travel that I was able to do under the Senate Intelligence Committee was really phenomenal, and I went to Afghanistan 5 times to visit our troops over there, and there's just something to be said about being able to see your country and the men that fight and women that fight for this country every day, and being able to be there to try to provide them some comfort and some gumption to keep going. And that really most likely was probably the best thing that ever happened out of my career there.
And we touched on this earlier, but you came to Bunge North America in 2015. What was kind of the biggest part of that transition for you? I mean, obviously you're going to a different building every day for work, but the work you're doing is also a lot different. Oh,
it is. It's very different because I had to completely learn the business of Bunge, and my headquarters is in St. Louis. Our international headquarters is in White Plains, and so for 6 months I led this office, but I didn't know the business of Bunge, and so it took me a long time to figure out how to get information and work my way through it. But it was very similar to going to the Intelligence Committee, where I had to learn my way around the intelligence community. So it's been interesting. Bunge's a wonderful company. The people are the most valuable asset that it has, and I really enjoy working for a company that believes in agriculture and also at the same time believes in its talent and the people that work for it.
Throughout your time on Capitol Hill in government affairs, what have you, really since that first job right out of college, how have you seen the perception of women in agriculture, being what they can accomplish, maybe the positions that they've been able to attain, what they've been able to do, and do you think that process has changed drastically from your first day to somebody's first day if they were to start now? I mean, how do you think things have become different?
I think there are more women in agriculture. I mean, you can just look at the staff on the Senate and Agriculture, the House and Senate Agriculture committees and see that there are more women on the staff. I definitely was one of, when I first came in 1990, if women were on the staff, they did nutrition issues. Now you have them doing major policy, farm policy issues. Bunge is still fighting to have women in agriculture. I think it's still a men's club, but it's getting a lot better all the time. And Bunge's worked hard at having diversity in having women work at the company, and I think they're doing a good job of that.
Let's shift gears a little bit here and talk about you personally. When you're not on the job, when you're not at work, what are kind of some of your favorite hobbies? What are the things that you love to do on nights and weekends, so to speak?
My husband and I, we love to play golf and tennis, and I love to cook, work in the yard. I love to read. So try to play, be active, and enjoy visiting with our friends and family.
What's the best round of golf you've ever played?
I don't know if I can say that. If I've ever played a good
Is there a
round.
best round of golf you've ever played, perhaps?
Let's just say I'm still a neophyte. I do much better on the tennis court.
Oh, shoot. And I also understand, being a product of the Greek system myself, I also understand that in your college years, you were a member of the Greek system as well.
I was a Chi Omega. I was
Okay.
president of Chi Omega at Mississippi State, the Phi Delta chapter.
Okay.
And it was a wonderful experience for me. I still have dear friends that I keep in touch with, and it's even more touching that I had 6 sorority sisters have children go through Rush this summer.
Wow.
At Mississippi State, and some of them went Chi Omega, some of them didn't. But it's fun to keep in touch with people and connect. So.
If we were to tell some of your Chi Omega sisters back when you were in college that you'd be one of the leading women shaping agricultural food policy in Washington, D.C. in the span of 25 years, how do you think they would have reacted to that news?
They would have said agriculture, but I was a leader in the sorority, so I don't know if they'd be that surprised that I continue to be driven. But I think they would be surprised that I've lived up here for that long. I never thought I was coming up here for 6 months, so I never thought I'd be here for 25 years. So.
And I'll wrap up with this one. If you could give a young Martha Scott the piece of advice that you wish you would have had on your first day on the job, way back in the day, what would that piece of advice be, and how do you think it would have changed or maybe differently shaped your career in Washington?
Wow. Don't take anything for granted, I think. I was driven when I got here, but I never knew that I would have the opportunities that I've had. And I do tell young people when they come to DC, just take the first job you can. If you want to work on the Hill, just get in and learn the process. If you learn the process, then the issues really don't matter. And find something that you're really interested in, and you will be driven and can do well there.
Martha Scott, thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.